The goal of this podcast is to help you break in and thrive in a career in advertising or marketing communications. And it's always helpful to hear from someone who recently broke in because they will have advice specifically tailored just for you. But sometimes you just need to hear from the boss. Jim Misener is one of the few presidents I have interviewed on this podcast, but he lends such poetic and meaningful advice for you. His passion and energy are apparent as he tells you about his experience as the president of the Chicago-based brand consultancy 50,000 Feet. They're a strategic brand consultancy that offers creative and brave solutions to their clients. You will get the feel of the community and togetherness over at 50,000 Feet through Jim's story in this episode. Plus, they're hiring. And it always helps to know the story and the motives of the president when applying. Jim will teach you the importance of constant learning and curiosity. So if you ever want to lead creativity one day, this is an excellent episode for you. And this show is supported by Chicago Portfolio School. They will help you create a fantastic advertising portfolio of work that will get you hired by some of the best agencies in the world. Plus, it's 1 year, which means a faster break-in. And to connect with Jim and to see what 50,000 Feet is all about, head over to our Instagram at Breaking and Entering Pod. One more time, it's at Breaking and Entering Pod, all one word, on Instagram. Now, on with the show. This is the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast, and as usual, I'm your accomplice, Gino Schellenberger. Kick it, Mikey. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special episode with Jim Misener. Jim, welcome to the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast. Thanks so much for coming on. How are you doing today?
I am good. Thank you, Gino, for that, for the gracious introduction and for the invitation as well. And I have to say, probably all of your guests say this, you have the best podcast name ever. I mean, it's great. So I love it.
Thank you so much. And coming from an expert like yourself in brand and consulting, that means a lot. And that's what we're here to talk about is you today, because Jim, you are the principal/president at 50,000 Feet Inc. What does that mean? What do you do? Tell us all about yourself, please.
Don't be misled by titles, right? And wouldn't it be magnanimous of me to say, oh, title doesn't matter, like the guy with president in his name, right? I'm a principal partner at 50,000 Feet. So I'm one of 4 equal partners. And not to, run down the nuance of the word. Partner means oftentimes the parlance, right, means you're the owner of a business. So 50,000 Feet is a wholly owned, privately held agency. So we're, our story says, or how we're positioned in the market, we're a brand consultancy and we're a creative agency. So we'll probably loop back on that positioning. So as a partner, we're owner of the business. We operate as well. So we come to work every day and work hard. We're principals, which in our parlance, right, means that we work closely with clients. So, we're practicing professionals like doctors, like lawyers, like advertising executives, many people, walks of life. And then president means a lot of P words, right? President means in title, I've been here 18 years. So I've grown up through the ranks. We're decidedly flat. It's not a hierarchical as you can get, but it's, at some point in the organization, there's responsibilities to move the organization forward. So I oversee client development, client service to some degree, along with a really wonderful team. I sit somewhere organizationally today between our strategy team and our creative team, getting involved with brand narrative, brand storytelling. I still work on lots of the platform development. I, alongside many of the team who are much better, much brighter than I, and still play an active role in client work. So like it a lot.
Wow. So it seems like you're probably pretty busy then. And that's a lot of work. And you've been doing it for a long time. You've been here for, you said 18 years and 7 months. At least that's what LinkedIn says.
I think that's it. Yeah. Someone asked me that today. I came the first week I arrived, first week of July in 2003. So yeah, I walked I walked in the doors and I stayed. So I must like it. I
Where,
like to say you create your own reality. So this
yeah.
is mine. Yep.
Where are the doors located, just so our audience knows?
Oh yeah. In Chicago, we're on Irving Park Road, so we're up on the north side. For people in Chicago, many will know where that is. So we're in Ravenswood, a kind of a creative, up and coming, up and coming creative corridor. It's much busier than it was 18, 20 years ago. We do
Wow.
have a New York office as well, so we're
Oh,
in Park and 23rd. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. I don't live too far from your office, so I'll have to come in and say hello.
There's so many people who live up here. Yeah, I love that's one of my favorite stories to tell because so many people say I don't live that far, which I think is great. I think
Yeah.
it's great.
Yeah, people love that, especially if you're coming in an office. I'm not sure your situation, but I want to get to know about the other principles that you said. And you said that you sit more in between strategy and creative, and you're pretty well active in the company and you're close to clients. What about the other principles? What other areas do they oversee?
Yep. Company was founded in 2001 by three gentlemen who grew out of a large creative agency here in Chicago. Two of them are still with us today. Ken Fox, Mike Peterson, both executive creative directors. So they oversee one. Mike oversees our um, broadcast practice, much of our video, our motion. He works across a wide array of clients as well. So it's certainly not limited to that area, although there's power and focus, as they say, right? So he's kind of grown into kind of a passion for storytelling in terms of moving words and images. And Ken, kind of acting executive creative director as well, oversees our creative team alongside with Tracy West, our group creative director, and he's active in every aspect of our work from a creative perspective. Chris Pressure, 404, came maybe arrived a year after I did, year and a half. So his background is in technology and UX, customer experience, kind of grew up in that area, went into strategy through that large system development, system build, and he's grown up into our chief strategy officer. So yeah,
Gotcha.
it's the four, and every one of them are close to clients on a daily basis. Whether they're working with long held incumbent clients, whether they're facilitating and having client conversations with newer clients, working with teams and all practice areas. So it's the culture here is decidedly close to client work. It's the work that is I think probably the lifeblood of the organization. It's the love of the people who are here. So
Mhm.
all of us are close to it.
Yeah, tell us more about the organization. It's a brand consultancy. So what does that mean? What's the structure like there? How do things work at 50,000 feet?
I think you should ask our staff and our client that. I think I'm like the most suspect one to answer that question. It's in terms of the positioning, it's something that we've maybe brand groups may be the worst at Dr. Heal Thyself or something, or Shoemaker Shoes. So we arrived at this bifurcated positioning after quite some time, and it's evolved. We've been a creative consultancy, we've been a creative agency, we've been a design firm at the start of our story. So where we are today with somewhat of this dual identity is about half of our client roster comes to us for consulting around brand expertise. So they're either originating a brand, launching a product and service, they're taking on a corporate rebrand of some kind. That could be in terms of verbal identity, visual identity, it could be brand strategy, it could be thinking through a corrective, a repositioning of a launch of a product and service, it could be a global brand entering a newer market, it could be a US based brand moving forward. So whether or not that task is associated with any creative expression, it's really, it oftentimes is, although it could be independent of. So we have deep strategy projects independent of. Creative agency is we have the wherewithal and the ability and the love to help express and storytell. So we like to say, and we think we originated this to some degree, we haven't heard it otherwise, Brand is a system and brand is a story. So a system in terms of architecture, positioning, all of the elements from differentiation, tenants, acumen, ATIC, vision, mission, values, and then stories help animate and bring those brands to life. So stories are endless, right? And those could be arrived at through large integrated campaigns. They could be through content marketing programs. They could be through beautifully rendered digital experiences. They could be born through a step and repeat email marketing program or digital marketing programs that keep you close to your clients and close to your customers. So we live really, not that there are two worlds, although we kind of try to really bring both of those worlds together. So it's wonderful strategic insight. It's excellence in terms of creative execution, and then oftentimes it is technology that really brings forward those ideas into really great experiences.
Yeah, love it. How many people are in your Chicago office?
We're about 35 folks working across 4 practice areas, so strategy, creative, client services, technology, which is exciting. And then we have close partners that complement those. So what it's an ecosystem, so to speak. So as we might need to reach out to a technology partner or a printing partner or a production partner for a shoot. So as all agencies run.
Love it. That's a good size. That's powerful. I feel like that's a powerful size for creativity. Are you hiring at all for our listeners, or will you be hiring at all?
We're hiring. Yeah, we're hiring. So
this will be in a couple of weeks from now from when we record.
Yeah, so we're hiring in all of our practice areas, and we're always having conversations independent of current market conditions, right? So we have proud alum, which we're really proud of. Once you're in the 50,000 family, 50,000 feet family, you never leave it. We hope so. It's the start of a story for us. And then we love to speak with students. We love to speak with people considering a change or some kind of transition or a possible move. And of course, we love to have conversations with people who are, in market. So whatever area they're looking for. So
love that. I want to get that out there for our listeners.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Excited.
Thank you.
Yeah, keep them hungry. So what's something that you guys have done as an agency recently that you're extremely proud of?
Oh, I mean, so many things, right? I could give you the extended remix. I could tear up on a podcast, right? Maybe I can, because who would know? I'm so proud of the team. I'm always proud of the team. I'm always so proud of our team. I'm really, really, really proud of the team these past 2 years. I'm proud at who would have ever thought, right? And we're not allowed to use the word unprecedented, right? As the memes tell us. Although, the last 2 years have been unprecedented. So I'm proud of people's wherewithal, their incredibly hard, their hard work, their trust in an immediately remote virtual work practice. Everyone overcame the frustration around stumbling online, right? Into Zoom calls and how to work remotely and how to keep your stamina and strength up and how to keep your creativity alive, how to work with clients all over the world in a quite different way and work. We were a pure play studio environment that we were in-person collaborative in both markets and both offices. And then we'd fly back and forth and we were in person. I mean, we were down into in-person, and to move into pure play for the extent of what would have been like the first year and a half, we're hybrid today. I'm so proud. Outside of that, I'm proud of our clients and, thank them and need to continue to thank them for staying by us. We actually had a great, and I hate to, I don't think anyone should or would measure the last couple of years in terms of economic activity, although we continued to grow and pretty significantly during the pandemic. So the health and the wealth of the agency is whole, and we're continuing to try to invest in talent and team and tools to drive us forward and stay closer and do better by our clients. So I'm super thankful for our clients. I'm super proud of them for continuing to invest in creativity, in storytelling, and the launch of different digital experiences and seeing the power of communications, the power of advertising. It's Yeah, I could go on and on and on. I
Yeah.
mean, of the work, and probably your listeners are probably more, possibly more interested. We launched some of the biggest campaigns of the life of our agency during the course of that. So we're proud partners with quite a roster of clients, global brands, right? So heavy hitters in financial and fintech, in professional services, across the rank, architecture and design. I mean, I could go down the list, and happy to do that during the course of this call. So, yeah. Anyway, it seems to have been a wellspring. I'm proud of everyone today too, because
Great.
we're somewhat emerging from the pandemic. I'd like to think there's a change in the air, right? That people are kind of thinking past, like, what's the newer normal going to be? And I think people are really open-eyed and open-eared here, and they're up for kind of pioneering a newer path for 50,000 feet. So super proud of that.
Love it. That's a great answer. And I also don't get the opportunity to interview presidents very often of companies. So I am curious. How do you create an environment of creativity, leading creatives for a living? What's your leadership style, would you say?
Oh, I think again, don't look to me for for an example. I think there's so many ways to that question, and I think there's so many other people in this organization who do it. Like, what I tried to do on a personal level is, um, I try to keep the business away from the teams in terms of, I think there's a lot of my personal leadership style, and I wouldn't advocate this on, on anyone. I really try to pull the business away from the business of creativity. So I don't like the teams to worry about the accounting of it, or
Hmm.
the service aspects, the operations of it. I really, really, really want their heads and the heart to be as open as possible during the time that they have, to really feel and think and express and create as much as they can, because I recognize that, it's a deadline driven and it's an intense environment, and we all care so intensely about what we do and who we do it for, that I want them to get lost in thought. So I do try to pull that away and simplify their days. Um, we try to keep minimal meetings and admin time, so we're not big on staff meetings.
Oh, nice.
We're not big on obligations of that kind, to keep clear of their day, and keep their heads clear.
Yeah.
I really try to keep out of the way. I really, really do. And then, the teams are so self-directed. They really are. That you try to keep this idea of quality and integrity really, really high. So we have
Yeah.
this, one of our adages, right? One of our 4 values or 4 pillars since the founding of the company is this idea of humility. So you've heard the expression, your ego's not your amigo, right? So, and it really is true. I think in the creative world, you have to believe in yourself and the power that you have in terms of the thought and the intention and the creativity that you can bring to a solution. Although ultimately you're contributing to something larger than yourself. So whether that's a project, a campaign, a digital experience, what have you, you've got to kind of leave it on the field, so to speak, like give it your all, and then don't take it home with you, although kind of believe in the power of the team. So,
Love it.
anyway, I got off script on your question. I think you lead people to do what they do best, to get the best out of them.
Love it. Yeah. That could be hard to do, I bet. I've never had to do that. Well, a little bit here and there, but not to the level that you're at. Great. Let's kick it back to how you got started and got to where you're at today. So we connected through Shahar, who has an episode earlier on this podcast, pretty early. I mean, it had to be top, or the first 10 episodes, I would have to guess I had him on, first 20 episodes. So Shahar is a professor at University of Illinois. I had Shahar. You know Shahar from, I don't know how you guys know each other, but you went to school, I'm assuming, together, or your buddies. But Shahar connected us, and I know you went to University of Illinois, so a lot of our listeners, frequent listeners, know that I went there. I have a lot of U of I alum on this podcast, but Other than that, tell me like your story. What made you just decide to get into this area?
Yeah, I mean, how much time do we have? So many years, right? So I'll give you the flyby and dig deeper or rush me through it. So um, I'm from a family of where there are five kids, five siblings, right? And we all went to Illinois. Like it was like, what's with that? Hadn't any of us like pushed out of that?
Well, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Aurora, Illinois. So I grew
Oh,
up in a far western suburb
where'd
of
you go to high school?
Chicago, West Aurora.
Okay.
Yeah, I went to
Yeah.
West Aurora. Yeah, we grew up out there. And I could get deep in the weeds about the context there. So we were far western suburbs, and my oldest brother looked at candidate schools, and he had was going to go to the University of Chicago, or he was going to go to Illinois. I remember it was one or the other. Quite a good student, and he decided to go to Illinois for who knows, a variety of reasons. I'm certain he's happy with that decision, right? Who knows? Second brother, right, John, was studying engineering, and he was going to go to Michigan and he was going to Illinois. My parents are like, come on, you got to go to Illinois. Aren't they number one? Michigan's 2 or 3 or whatever. I'm going to get in trouble because probably all these rankings they're expired and probably inaccurate.
The rankings, of course.
Yeah. So it got to me, and I don't know whether it was my like teenage rebellion or it was, it's kind of, depending on where you are in a family and kind of where you are in your time. I remember I didn't even do my college application. My dad did it because it was a foregone conclusion that I was going to go to Illinois. So by the third time, and we're all 1 year apart.
Okay.
So it's like bam, 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 bam. So I got to it and I was like, yep, I'm going to go to Illinois. So my dad did my application. I signed it away, and then there it went. And I went to Illinois. I was 17 at the time, so I was a youngster. I was kind of precocious, and I loved it. I opened up at Illinois in a way that I hadn't, and I never thought of myself as a student. I never do, and maybe I don't today, although I was like deep in the books. Like I lit up because I don't know whether it was the atmosphere. I felt like the world opened. You could go down all these directions. It was kind of like, going to a restaurant and ordering anything off the menu you wanted. So I remember like, my eyes lit up in history and in English and literature and philosophy and art history and economics. And I mean, I was like pretty straight A. I was like highest honors and went all the way. I mean, I was all in, James Scholar student, which like every door I could open, I opened. I decided to study English. And I talked to someone in an interview before, and this is so braggartly, although I think it's not intended that way. It's like a lesson. I remember we took the ACTs and SETs. And I was like a perfect in math. And I was a perfect in science. And my drag down score was in English. So I said, well, I've got to study English. Like I've got to do what, Eleanor Roosevelt, right? She said, do that thing you cannot do. And I still tell people that. I was like, that's some of the best advice, because I don't know. I feel like you got to like run toward the fire. So I studied English. I didn't exempt out of Ret 105, I remember. And it was great because, I thank stars that I spent the time writing, and I grew up. I took equal amounts literature and philosophy as I did art history. Got really snagged on the intersection. I was pre-law, and I thought what I really wanted to do was work for the National Endowment for the Arts. So after Illinois, I went to Cité in Paris. I studied abroad, and I had studied French and Spanish when I was in college. So I got
French and Spanish.
Yeah, and it was so because I wanted, I don't know. This is like crazy. I know why I did that. We don't have time. So I studied modern languages and fine art in Paris, and I was snagged on that. And came back and was still deferring law school, and I ended up I got a chance as I was doing some graduate work to waiting my time, saying, okay, I'm going to do it. And I had been accepted. A good friend of mine was moving to California, and she was studying for GREs, and she was going to, wind her path through education. So I moved to San Francisco with her, and we roomed together to split the rent, the bill. And I thought, well, I'm going to work for a senator. I'm going to work for the senator. And it was like, how this ever worked, I can't even believe it worked. So I wrote a letter to the senior senator, and I ended up getting a gig. And I interned at this senator. I went into public communications. We answered phones and we wrote letters, and it was a wonderful, wonderful time. I really loved my time there. And then I came back, and at that point, I have to kind of round the corners on some of this because I have 20 years to cover. I did end up working for public affairs group, and in terms of a larger election in the state of Illinois when I was back here. It was kind of a stomping ground. And then from there, I kind of lit up, and I went my way up to, I think you shared, in terms of some of the prep for this. I did go to what was Anderson Consulting then.
Mm-hmm.
It's Accenture today. I loved my time there. I loved it. After about, I think, 4 some years, I went to Ernst & Young and followed that path for a different set of challenges. And then from there, I kind of stepped into agency life, which seemed like a natural progression for a lot of what was going on in the world. And I guess I loved it. So I was there to stay, or I decided I needed to kind of make a commitment, and I did, and away we went. So,
well, I think there's a natural consulting, and you have to dive into businesses when you're, when you have brands as clients, and you do that in consulting, and you do that in advertising and marketing. So there is a little bit of a similarity, but it's not too often that I interview people on this podcast and they come from a big four in their background. And what made you make that jump? What made that decision in your head that was okay to do?
It was time. It was my time working in the public sector that I seemed to kind of gain the insight that so much change in a public sector space was driven by people who had private sector experience. And I went to as an English major and as someone who had thought, okay, I go on to law. I had such a broad liberal arts education, and I felt I didn't know how to read a balance sheet, and I didn't know anything about technology at the time, and was curious and interested, but maybe again, it was like, why did I study English if that was my weakest skill? So someone had said, you really should have a conversation in these groups. And, so I had a friend who had a friend, and I ended up going through the rounds of interviews, and I loved it. I loved that it was all about education, self-improvement. It was like problem solving. It was working on some of the most exciting, challenging times of the day. And I loved it. And in retrospect, super challenging. I mean, in Anderson, and, I don't quote me, I guess. And, at the time, you went through 3 weeks of training in the office. I remember in the Chicago office, and they taught you about finance, and they taught you C. So you had to learn how to program in C. And then they sent you to St. Charles 3 more weeks. So gosh, an organization that pays you and invests 6 weeks in training. And then my first client was in financial services, a large card company we all know. And they said, Jim, you're going to begin there, and you're going to, go to Phoenix. And I needed to learn how to code in COBOL at the time. And they were switching from mainframe to client service, which means nothing to most of these. And it was all object-oriented computing. So I became a software programmer. I was a software programmer for 2.5 years. And boy, talk about a learning curve. And I loved it, though. I really loved it. It was just like speaking another language, right? Easier than French. So, and then I grew up into product marketing and communications. And I will say my soft skills, I kind of was like, I could open up into, I was a much probably better brand marketer than I was a software developer. I think anyone listening who may have known me at the time would get that. So, and then I grew up the ranks there, and I went into communications for the group. I went into brand marketing, process consulting. So I liked it.
Gotcha. And then that leads you to, does that lead us to when you started at 50,000 feet, or was there any gaps?
Oh gosh, I jumped to EY because I got this wonderful client role from a global perspective, and worked in this amazing role in business development for EY for about 3 years, and got to see the world, and that was phenomenal. And lived abroad with both companies. Lived in England and New York with.
Wow.
Yeah, I loved it. I loved my time. And then I loved EY. And then I came back and I started with a group, a digital agency, because I'm, I'll come out and say it because people will be like, how old are you? I'm 51. At the time of management, it's important, I think, for the conversation. I was 28, and there was a thing called the internet that
Mm,
people were like, what's the internet? What's a website? And at that time, it was a real question of, do management consultants or do advertising agencies build websites, and who owns the voice on the internet? So it was really, it was kind of, I think it's a conversation that's happening again. I mean, to some degree, right? I mean, I think we know what the internet is, right? So I always liken it to the Bering Straits that apparently freezes every year, and animals cross from Russia and Alaska, and then sometimes they get stuck on the other side until the next winter when it thaws. So I crossed over to the agency world, and in the .com, and it was good. Although, would I have decided to plant my feet squarely on that soil? Maybe, I don't know. The .com collapse, there was little decision made me, so I felt like the ice thawed. I know there's probably more parameters I need to give to the story. It's like, what is this guy talking about? And I was like, hey, I'm on the agency side. So anyway, I worked for a digital agency and I learned a ton again. And then we ended up founding a group that did some pretty visible things, which were pretty exciting. And then when we ended up exiting that group in a positive, wonderful way. I knew some folk at a little group called 50,000 Feet, and I really loved the work. I loved the people who were working there. There were about 3 people at the time, 4 people, and I joined. So at
gotcha.
that point, yeah.
Interesting career. Very, very interesting. But it seems to me that the trend here is your passion for learning.
It sounds like it. I must be in that mood today because I don't know whether I'd self-identify, but I'm like crazy about. I guess I really am crazy about learning. Like if you'd say, "What do you do on your off time?" It's yeah. I like adventure. I like reading. I like learning. I love talking to people. I mean, part of it is I I want here talking about to you because it's one more door, right? Like I think, oh my gosh, I know about the world that you're creating out there in your series. So yeah, I think I do like learning.
Love it. So, other than constant learning, what other advice do you have for the aspiring marketer or advertiser that's looking to break in or switch careers to something more creative, more strategic?
Oh yeah, I mean, be really open, right? I mean, gosh, what broad, big advice that is almost meaningless in its approach, right? I mean, be open with yourself about the power you have in terms of what you think and what you create, how you go about that process. Be open with what you want out of it. Be open to learn. Be open to be wrong. I think I don't want to even say early in your career you're wrong more times than you're right. I think really if you're doing it right, you continue to be as wrong as you get to be my age as when you were yours. So, be constantly open to engaging in the world in newer, different ways, right? And I think that's part of what growing is about. I mean, you talk about creativity and you talk about growth, right? It's interesting that they're not one and the same, although they kind of are. It's venturing forth where you haven't been. So when a company wants to grow, they're expanding their market presence, they're meeting different clients, or they're meeting different customers, or somehow they're gaining momentum right outside of themselves. And when you think about creativity, right, you're finding newer relationships or newer ways of being and going and exploring. What are those connections? What are those expressions? What are those different ways of showing up? So yeah, you got to be open. One word that I don't think that people talk enough about in creativity is, and this sounds like so crazy, relax. You got to stay a little bit relaxed, and maybe people will identify that like staying relaxed in present environment is, maybe not the easiest thing to do for any of us. And definitely I recognize the challenges for some of us. It's, I swam for a lot of my life. And there's no one getting out of a conversation without entering, me talking about swimming, right? So I swam for 17 years competitively. And then every swimmer seems to take like 20 years off. Like, I'm never going to go back in the pool. So in my mid 40s, I went back because you have like 20 good years of running in you, and then your knees my knees don't hurt, but I didn't want them to hurt. So I was like, I'm going to go back to swimming. So, and I got hooked again. So I, swim competitively, and I'm in a couple teams, and I'm really down into that. Tried to get really serious a few years ago before the pandemic. And part of competition is focus, and you've got to like be absolutely focused, and it's down to like splits of a second, although you got to stay relaxed. And there's this thing about it, right? I think creativity is the same way. It's like, how do you take it to the edge? Although, how do you keep it cool? So,
no, it's fantastic advice. Can people reach out to you if they're interested in 50,000 feet?
They can. I hope they do. And, and I say this not to shy away from answering emails. I mean, they can come to our website and they can engage there too, because 50,000 feet is by real intention, collectivist and team oriented. So they should talk to people here. They should connect to people here. They want to have a conversation. We host events. We host openings. We host students. We finished an externship a couple weeks ago. So please engage.
Great.
They could call or email me too.
And if you're listening, the way to do that is to go to our Instagram at Breaking and Entering Pod, all one word on Instagram. We'll have the resources there listed where you can reach out. We'll figure out what the resources are, and we'll put those in there by the time you're listening. But Jim, that's all I got. Did we miss anything? Do you want to shout anything else out? I'm going to wrap it up now.
I think, less is better. Less of me is better. Is a better me. So
it was really a great conversation.
No. Thank you, Gino. I mean, thank you too. I mean this for doing what you do, because it's you're speaking to a really important generation of folk who are gonna make our world better. So thank you.
Well, thank you for talking to them. You have a great day. We will be in touch.
Sounds good. Thanks, man. Good to see you. Bye.
Did you hear anything on this episode about a job you'd like to have someday, soon, in advertising, strategy, design? The kind of job where you use your brain and your creativity? If you did, chances are a portfolio can really help you get that job. That's where Chicago Portfolio School comes in. They have programs and classes that help you show off your thinking and get you the job you want. So visit them at chicagoportfolio.com. And if you drop my name, Gino, into the chat box, they'll send you more info and a cool Sharpie. Or just some more info. You can decide that. Thanks. Thank you so much for listening to this entire episode of the Breaking and Entering Advertising podcast. If you liked what you listened to today and you like the guests, please go ahead and connect with them. Easiest way to find their contact information and to see those resources that they recommended for you is to go to our Instagram at Breaking and Entering Pod, all one word. And for some quick thank yous for making this show possible, the first one is the company Shure. It's a microphone company, Shure. They provided the microphone that you're listening to right now. It's the MV7. It's great for podcasting and other forms of content. So if you're interested in starting a podcast or you're looking for equipment, talk with me. I really recommend the Shure MV7. Happy to give you details on that. And I would also like to thank my two guys, Mikey Malarkey, who's our audio engineer, does it every week. He's the Let's Kick It in the beginning. Thank you to Mikey. And of course, thank you to Buchan Zhang, our creative director. Buchan is responsible, amazing visuals on our Instagram. So thank you, Buchan. And thank you all once more for listening. We will see you next week.